Hi there, my name's James Kelly and a warm welcome back to Scott Goes Pop. And as you'll have seen yesterday, or even on Saturday night possibly, we have a new Norstat full-scale Scottish poll, which is the fourth full-scale Scottish poll we've had over the last week or so, which is an incredible little run. And this one is really good news for the SNP and for the wider independence movement, because on the question, should Scotland be an independent country? Yes are on 53% of the vote and no are on 47%. And although that is a 1% decrease in the yes vote and a 1% increase in the no vote, it's still really encouraging, because until not that long ago, until, well into last year, Norstat and Panelbase, who were the immediate predecessors of Norstat, looked very much like one of the no-friendly companies. They tended to produce slightly better results for no than possibly the average. Certainly usually had no in the lead. But in sort of late autumn last year, there was a Norstat poll that had yes drawing level. And then at the very end of the year, there was another Norstat poll that pushed yes quite a way into the lead. There's been two more Norstat polls in the early part of this year that had yes in the lead. And because other polling firms weren't really showing this pro-yes trend, it's like we've carried on waiting for the bubble to burst and for Norstat to revert to showing a no lead. But that hasn't happened. And now that we've had four polls in a row that have had yes in the lead from Norstat, five in a row that have either had yes in the lead or a joint lead, a 50-50, you can't really say that's a coincidence. And it now looks really like there are three polling companies, Ipsos, Find Out Now and Norstat, that are consistently showing yes ahead, whereas previously there were only two, Find Out Now and Ipsos. And because, Ipsos don't poll very often, and because Find Out Now are, have this reputation of, well, they have a certain reputation for some reason. It was easy to dismiss those polls, and it was easy to sort of squint at it. And because Ipsos don't poll very often, they don't sort of appear very often on the list of polls, so you could squint at it and look. And a lot of people did conclude that basically no were probably in the lead. But I think now it's harder to say that. It's a debatable point whether yes or no look like they are in the lead when you look at polls as a sort of totality. And I think you can make a case that yes actually are in the stronger position at the moment. That's important because if we look at the ways that we could possibly break through Westminster intransigence on not coming to the negotiating table, either on independence or on a referendum, one way that could possibly happen is if it becomes a sort of an accepted fact that, in inverted commas, yes are ahead in the polls. Maybe it doesn't need 100% of polls to be showing yes in the lead, but I think you'd need the vast majority of polls to be showing a decent yes lead if that was going to become the perception. And certainly having a third polling company that looks like it's consistently showing yes in the lead is an important step towards that. But we won't get there until perhaps YouGov start moving towards yes. And what it will take for that to happen, I'm not sure. Although this is the interesting point here that two of the companies that have consistently shown yes in the lead do not wait by recalled vote from 2014. As I understand it, from my recollection of the previous data tables from Norstat, they do still wait by 2014 vote, which raises the interesting point that yes might be even further ahead with Norstat if that weighting was removed. And I kind of feel like eventually that weighting is going to have to be removed across the polling industry because it's no longer possible to justify it. Both Ipsos and Find Out Now make the point that there's a danger of false recall if you wait by a referendum, particularly one that happened so long ago. And I just don't see how the polling industry can continue to justify relying on a recall of a vote from well over a decade ago. And the longer you go on like that, the greater the risk of false recall. I think they're just avoiding the inevitable, and they don't want to bite the bullet and find an alternative way of correcting for any greater enthusiasm for yes supporters to take part in polls. But eventually they're going to have to do that, and I think once they do, we could possibly see a corrective and yes moving into the lead more comprehensively across the polling industry. And at that point, we could get back to that golden period between the summer of 2020 and early 2021, when every single poll across the polling industry showed a yes lead. I remember that period well because I actually commissioned 3 of those polls myself, including the very first one in that sequence. And then if we had that for maybe like 2, 3, 4 years, then maybe that could be enough to kind of break through the intransigence to some extent, although it would obviously be preferable if instead of relying on opinion polls, which are in the hands of people, some of them we know are not necessarily sympathetic to independence or to the independence cause, and a lot of them are based in London, of course. It would be better if the SNP took some decisive action to bring the matter to a head and to seek a mandate via a scheduled election. But we live in the world we live in, and this may be an alternative way forward if that doesn't happen. There are also party political voting intentions in the Norstat poll, although they're not presented in the most user-friendly fashion in the Sunday Times write-up, but the SNP are on 34% of the constituency vote, Reform are in second place on 20%, and Labour on only 17%. The Sunday Times make the point that is the lowest result for Labour in a Norstat Sunday Times poll since 2021. On the regional list ballot, the SNP are on 29% and Reform and Labour are tied on second place on 18%. In terms of seats, that would give the SNP a commanding position with 59 seats, but that is 6 seats short of an overall majority. Labour would have 20 and Reform would have 19. See if I can find... Yeah, the Greens are on projected to be on 7 seats, so that means that in combination the pro-independence parties would have 66, which is just barely an overall majority. But it's basically the same pattern we also saw from the previous polling companies that have reported over the last week, which is the SNP are falling short of this self-imposed artificial target that John Swinney has set of a single party overall majority, but they are getting a pro-independence majority in combination with the Greens. So why on earth are we setting ourselves a hard target, not the target we are clearly on course to actually meet? And hopefully that can be amended and get us back on a sensible course at the SNP conference next month. Once again, and I suppose this is not unexpected or not surprising, the Sunday Times have gone into sort of propaganda mode with this, with the results of this poll, and they've completely buried the independence results. I mean, objectively, a 53% support for independence when London are denying a referendum or any chance of a referendum, and therefore, if you can demonstrate that yes are in the lead, that demonstrates that Scotland is effectively in a prison at the moment. So it's newsworthy. That is objectively newsworthy. So why have they buried it? The only explanations for that would be that they don't want people to know, or that they don't believe the result, in which case, why are they continuing with Norstat as their regular pollster? Either way, that does not reflect well on the Sunday Times. They've also presented the result of a supplementary question on immigration in a very strange way. How do you feel about current levels of immigration into Scotland? And they've sort of contrasted the people who said it's too high with those who say it's too low. Who really responds to a poll by saying that immigration is too low? The obvious contrast should be drawn with those who say it's too high with those who say it's about right, because about 25% of respondents in the poll said that immigration levels are about right. And of course, that's still way behind the people who say that it's too high, but nevertheless, it gives you a slightly more realistic sense of the true position in terms of public opinion. The other thing that leaps out as really odd from the Sunday Times write-up is the fact that, well, they note that the SNP and Greens have a majority in combination, but then go on to speculate that the SNP might do a deal with the Liberal Democrats instead. Why? Why would that make sense from the SNP's point of view? Is that just something the Sunday Times would like to happen? Maybe it is. On personal ratings, John Swinney is the most popular or the least unpopular of the party leaders. He's on a net rating of -3. Nigel Farage is on -20. Anas Sarwar is behind Nigel Farage on -21, and Keir Starmer is on -42. And this is now a very clear established pattern. We saw the same thing from Ipsos. John Swinney always seems to be the most popular or the least unpopular leader. And we know from past elections that leadership ratings or the perceptions of leaders has a big impact on the outcome of elections. It can sometimes be more predictive of elections than voting intention numbers, certainly when you're several months out. So that's certainly very reassuring for the SNP and makes it less likely that something's going to go wrong between now and May. Anyway, that's it for now. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be really helpful. See you later.